From a distance, the shallow waters just outside Houston can appear almost pristine, but hidden in plain sight lies a threat very few are even aware of.
We are headed out into Trinity Bay, and that is where they believe there is the largest concentration of these abandoned offshore wells. And the concern is that they're leaking.
More than 100 abandoned oil and gas wells have been left to rot in this bay for decades. They're considered abandoned because they haven't produced in years.
We are utterly surrounded in every direction by abandoned oil and gas wells. I mean, it looks like a graveyard out here. There's actually a cactus growing from that platform right now. You can see it clear as day.
Like most abandoned wells, these decaying rigs are rarely checked for leaks, which is why we've come to see if we can detect any ourselves. As we approach one well, we cut the engine and hear an ominous sound.
This is hissing. I can hear it.
We've brought along a handheld gas detector that experts explain will alert us if combustible gas is leaking.
There, it's going, it's going, it's going. The second I put it over here. So this well is actively leaking combustible gas, so much so that you can hear it. Typically, these aging wells, when they leak gas, it is methane. So that is a dangerous greenhouse gas. And so not only is it a threat to its immediate environment, but it is a threat to the environment globally.
Nearby, we find another abandoned well where there's bubbling just below the surface.
You can see this thing just bubbling everywhere. Oh, it's high, high. And I mean, you can just see how much it's bubbling.
This is a dark side of the fossil fuel industry. A hidden, mostly invisible threat lurking just beneath the surface of more than 25 states.
This is just one small bay in a large coast. Stuff's all over the place.
There are more than 3.5 million abandoned oil and gas wells across the U.S. that we know of.
We've found that around 14 million Americans live within a mile of an abandoned well.
Those that leak are known in Texas as zombie wells.
A zombie is something that's been killed or dead and comes back to life. That's what I call a zombie well. They're coming back to life.
Leaking abandoned wells can contaminate groundwater and spew carcinogenic chemicals and harmful greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
These wells are a threat to people and livelihoods, and especially kids and older people and people with health problems. The scariest thing that can happen is that there have been too many home explosions related to orphaned and abandoned wells.
Yet despite the risks, experts we spoke with say not enough are inspected for leaks. Which is why ABC News, along with 6 owned and affiliated stations, set out on the largest journalistic investigation of its kind, fanning out across the nation with gas detectors to hunt down and test abandoned wells for dangerous leaks.
Oh.
That's your H2S monitor going off.
I'm gonna back away for a minute. We just wanna make sure we're safe.
We need to go find them because they're a problem not just for the people who live nearby, but for everyone on the planet.
In all, our team tested 76 wells across 5 states and found 40, more than half, were leaking oil or combustible gas at the time.
All right, okay, let's test it. Almost immediately. And straight up to the high end. It's topped out already at 10,100.
That leak could just go on for years and years and years.
We discovered leaking wells along streams in New York.
Okay, we have another leak.
And atop sunlit hills in California.
This is just full of oil.
But nowhere has more abandoned wells than Texas. More than 600,000 of them pepper the state, and they're particularly common in the Permian Basin, where Laura Briggs built her family's dream home.
It takes a lot of work to get your finances and your life and your family together enough to purchase land all on your own. I felt lucky to have it. It was a lifestyle choice to raise your kids rurally in the hopes that they would appreciate nature and where their food comes from and hard work And the other side of life, it's not so easy.
Laura knew there were more than 30 abandoned wells on the land when she bought it. But what the mother of four didn't expect was that some of the wells had begun to leak, and no one was taking responsibility to clean them up.
All right, let's do this.
Okay.
She agreed to show us some of those abandoned wells right on her ranch.
And this one's actively leaking. It's been leaking for years.
Oh, wow, you can see, yeah, there's oil all over. You can see it bubbling there.
Leaking from there.
When did you start to notice this?
Probably 2015.
So for some 10 years, it's been seeping out.
And it's gotten worse.
The well's latest operator declared bankruptcy years ago, making it what's called an orphan well. It's now left up to the state and ultimately taxpayers to plug them. Laura says she's been complaining about this one to Texas authorities for years, but nothing has been done.
So I've got a letter response from them in May that just says it'll be plugged according to priority.
Where is this on the priority list?
Probably not very high. They have got so many out of control wells that they have to get to first.
So they're gonna wait till it's catastrophic.
Right, yes.
Texas has more than 8,000 documented orphaned wells, and oil isn't the only potentially harmful substance found leaking from them. Some also emit dangerous gases like methane, a highly combustible and potent greenhouse gas, and hydrogen sulfide, or H2S, an extremely deadly gas that these special air monitors detect.
How dangerous is the H2S gas?
If this goes off, from what I've been instructed by safety people who sell these things, you run against the wind. It's serious enough that everyone carries one of these.
So it's not just a part of ranch life out here, it's a part of everyday life.
It's like a seatbelt.
We've also brought along a different handheld gas detector. And while more advanced gear is required to determine the exact gas type and full scope of the leak over time, multiple experts told us the device we used can detect hundreds of combustible gases and can alert us if a well is leaking when we test it.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and test this.
The device measures gas in parts per million and maxes out at 10,000.
I'm gonna try to test this part right here. I can see it consistently bubbling. Oh, it just went off. Wow, we're at 3,800. Here we go. It's registering down here now too. This is hugely concerning. I can see your house. That is where you raised your babies.
Yes.
During our visit, we tested the 5 abandoned wells closest to Laura's home.
So this just went off.
And found 2 to be leaking oil and combustible gas at the time.
When you imagined your life out here, did you imagine that as part of it?
No, I thought the state regulated this stuff. I never thought that this would be allowed to go on. Without somebody to cause a little trouble, nobody would even know this is out here.
Despite years of complaints, Laura says the state authority in charge of regulating the oil and gas industry in Texas, called the Texas Railroad Commission, or TRRC, had only plugged 3 of the 30-plus abandoned wells located on her land by the time of our visit. TRRC Commissioner Jim Wright told our Houston station, KTRK, that we do not have the money to plug all of the 8,500 orphaned wells in Texas. And so the commission has developed a very good system to prioritize plugging operations for those that leak, adding they had plugged 730 last year.
So what's the next step for you here?
Right now, we just watch the wells and we wait for them to leak bad enough that the Railroad Commission makes them a priority and they come out and plug them.
It's blown oil all over this lady's pasture.
Laura didn't have to wait much longer.
The well's blowing out below ground.
About a month after our visit, one of the wells closest to her house suffered a major blowout and began to form an oily pool. The leak has been stopped, but Laura's worried it could happen again while she waits for the state to plug it. A few miles away lies one of the most notorious abandoned wells in the nation.
A striking example of what happens when these wells are neglected for decades is this. It's Lake Beamer. This is a body of toxic water that has been formed by a leak. that at times is spewing up to 600 gallons of water every single minute. And that water contains things like arsenic, benzene. At times, it is radioactive. It has proved dangerous to be around and deadly for the wildlife.
It looks pretty, but there's bones in the water. There's bones all around here because the birds come and there's H2S in this water, and eventually the gas kills them. And so this is where they come to die. You got to keep in mind is that
Local rancher Skylar White has been trying to get the site cleaned up for years.
What's being done to fix this?
not a darn thing.
According to state records, the leaking well that created Lake Beamer was drilled looking for oil in 1951. But when the operators didn't find any, they converted it into a water well before abandoning it. As a result, the Texas Railroad Commission has refused to plug it, despite pleas from local landowners like Skylar. The TRRC says it's the local water district's responsibility, but the water district wants the TRRC to do it. They call the site a serious threat. Meanwhile, the well continues to leak day after day.
It smells awful. It's that sulfur smell. It smells like rotten eggs. It's terrible. And so he put his H2S monitor down here. Oh, and it went off right away. Look at that. I mean, that's scary. It makes you want to back up. How quickly should we be leaving?
H2S, when you can't smell it anymore, that's when you're fixing to die.
To confirm the well is the source of the gas leak, we have to get up close.
I'm going to put on my mask. All right, so just to make sure that's secure. This is also monitoring the H2S levels. Oh, there it just went. All right, so it's reading combustible gas is also spewing out.
Nearby, Skylar took us to a well he recently discovered on his family's 20,000-acre ranch.
That's produced water, oil, gas.
This is a mess.
Yeah, you're telling me.
It reeks out here. It smells so bad, like sulfur.
The leaking well formed a toxic pool that stretched down nearby dirt roads.
How long will this look like this?
This ground is dead forever. This ground will never grow anything on it.
Sites like these are all too common in West Texas. There's more than 200 orphan wells on Skylar's ranch alone.
Oh.
That's your H2S monitor going off.
I'm going to back away for a minute. We just want to make sure we're safe.
Later on, Skylar takes us to another abandoned well on his land. He says this one, left to rot beside a dried-up river, was unknown to state authorities until he alerted them.
You feel like you've been forgotten about a little bit?
Yeah, and stomped on and everything else. Our family's been here since 1883, and we're not going anywhere. And so, you know, the solution is to make enough noise that maybe we'll get some of this stuff fixed.
And make it better for the future generations.
Right. That's the whole thing. When it's all said and done, when I'm in the ground, you know, I want to do as good a job as I can so that my kids won't come back and say, I wonder why Dad did this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's the thing that really gets you, you know.
Yeah.
While most abandoned wells are in rural areas like Skylar's, thousands can be found beneath one of America's biggest cities. Here, in a city that's most known for its sunny coastline and Hollywood stars, is a little-known fact. Los Angeles was once the site of sprawling oil fields. Even in its most urban areas, oil and gas wells can still be found hidden in plain sight, next to homes, or even disguised behind fake buildings. Countless more are buried beneath the city's development. Many drilled before the government kept any records. Their presence only revealed by historic photographs. And to those who know exactly where to look.
So there's another vent right next to us. They're actually a part of the fence, so they're camouflaged a little bit.
In the working-class neighborhood of Vista Hermosa, beside an athletic field located atop more than a dozen abandoned wells, these pipes, disguised as fence posts, are actually methane vents. 3 of the wells beneath remain unplugged, and the vents are designed to mitigate risks by discharging potentially harmful gas away from nearby school buildings into open areas.
There's another vent right here.
Danny Luna has lived in this community his entire life, where more than 800 unplugged and abandoned oil wells lurk beneath the surface.
As I walk to work, I would actually see the kids running along for their PE.
Running right next to
them? Yeah, so right underneath the vents.
He and a group of residents are showing us around today.
As you can see, we have the downtown skyline. We are within walking distance of downtown LA, yet we are the dark stain in the backyard of City Hall.
Lifelong Vista Hermosa resident Rosalinda Morales has lived beside abandoned wells for more than 60 years.
I've grown up my whole life smelling rotten eggs. There was an oil mechanism in the front yard of this house.
So you remember it?
Oh, absolutely. My family has lived on this street for almost 70 years and 3 generations. So I know it well.
Rosalinda says the residents are afraid for their health.
We have a lot of medical conditions here. We have people with autoimmune conditions, cancers.
It's difficult to prove what caused those residents' health issues, but studies show those living near oil and gas wells are more prone to such illnesses. When she was young, Brenda Valdivia was babysat by a family that lived right next to an active well. She says she's been dealing with medical issues that she believes are linked to the area's wells since she was 10.
I was getting really sick, and I had high fevers, rash in my face, and they discovered that I had lupus.
It's a devastating diagnosis. Tell me what your adult life has been like.
When I was 22, I had 2 strokes in one night, so that's hard.
Yeah.
I'm still recovering, and I take it day by day.
The wells beneath this neighborhood have leaked dangerous gases into the air here in the past. For years, Rosalinda's next-door neighbor complained to authorities about a bad smell coming from his front steps. But after nothing was done to fix it, he took matters into his own hands.
The smell was always right at the front steps, and that's why he took the jackhammer.
Oil well. Oh, yeah.
And when he opened it up, there was a slab. It looked like a tombstone.
Wow. That discovered an abandoned well that had H2S gas coming out?
Yes, because it smelled constantly like rotten eggs.
H2S is deadly.
Yes, yeah. Pretty scary because that's what we're breathing here.
That well, along with one across the street, was plugged by state authorities after it was discovered, but hundreds remain unplugged and mostly out of sight. But on the outskirts of the city, you can see them up close.
We're following a map to look for these abandoned oil and gas wells.
State maps show that there's a cluster of abandoned wells located on this popular hiking trail next to a residential area.
Our map shows it kind of should be right around this tree. And yeah, actually, you can already smell it a little bit. Oh yeah. Wow. Okay, so if you look at this, this is abandoned oil and gas well. It's open at the top. And so look at that. This is just full of oil, and it is just sitting here right outside of a neighborhood. Oh, it's actually bubbling. Oh, that smell is intense. Oh, there's the beep. There it is. Oh, wow. These numbers are climbing fast.
This leak maxed out our combustible gas detector.
Oh, this is at 10,000. 10,000. And imagine, you could be hiking just a few feet down there on the trail. You would never even know this was here.
State records show there are at least 5 abandoned wells in this area, most drilled decades ago. Today, we find 3 wells, 2 of which are leaking.
There's another one here. It's leaking all the way through and corroded.
Inspections records show state authorities have known that some of these wells have been leaking for years. And while they're on the agency's latest list for plugging, they're behind dozens of other wells the agency has deemed more important to plug first. In response, CalGEM, the state agency responsible for regulating the oil and gas industry, wrote to ABC News that the agency is currently working through a list of 378 wells for plugging, and that these wells are a top priority and will be plugged and sealed soon to protect the environment and ensure public safety.
Properly plugging an abandoned orphan well can cost millions of taxpayer dollars. That's in part because the bonds oil and gas companies are required to post before drilling a well are rarely enough to cover the actual cost of plugging it, often leaving taxpayers to pick up the rest.
Oil and gas operators, collectively as an industry, could certainly solve this problem. The industry can and must do more to make sure that this orphan well burden doesn't fall on the public.
In 2021, Congress set aside an unprecedented $4.7 billion for plugging abandoned wells nationwide. But an ABC News data analysis of multiple sources estimates the cost of plugging most of the nation's abandoned and unplugged wells could be more than $250 billion. And current government funding will only cover plugging costs for about 6% of the nation's abandoned wells.
We will take it as far as we can to try to get the cost recovered for these.
Money is always an issue, funding getting these wells removed.
There have been numerous attempts on both the state and federal level to pass laws raising the bonds required by companies to cover the plugging costs. But few have passed as they repeatedly face strong opposition from industry trade groups like the American Petroleum Institute.
The industry associations will go to legislators and regulators and say, you can't raise these bond amounts, it'll put us out of business. And the problem with that is, well, are we supposed to live with orphan wells then? Why is the public subsidizing this activity?
We wanted to get the perspective of the oil and gas industry, so we reached out to the American Petroleum Institute for an interview, and they declined.
I think the industry takes the issue of abandoned wells seriously, but they don't really like to talk about it because it's kind of a dirty secret.
API did provide a statement that reads in part, "The proper sealing of oil and natural gas wells is paramount to ensure safety, sustainability, and environmental protection, and API and our member companies are committed to responsible development of our nation's energy resources from start to finish."
The current arrangement isn't working, so we need to come up with something new.
Why not leave?
Why? Where would I be able to afford it in this city? Most of my neighbors have lived there no less than 40 years. This is our home.
Addressing the nation's abandoned wells is no simple task. Even if there were enough money to plug them, it would take dedication at the local, state, and federal level to find a solution. Until that happens, the number of abandoned wells and the leaks they can cause is likely to continue to balloon year after year, a growing threat for those living beside them.
You are every day just waiting for a catastrophe.
Yeah, but we do love living out here. Where would we go, you know? We've made this our home, and there's good things to be done out here.